Nicole?
Nicole's not on, Pete.
Oh, hey, Billy, could you stop?
Yeah.
Could you stop the recording, please?
Mhm. Oh, Mr. Nguyen will be attending momentarily.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get us started. So this is a call to order the Board of Equalization meeting for June 28th. I will start with a statement. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 2086. The members who are present are myself, Anthony Sally, David Farrell, Bob Beard, and Waki Nguyen. We are all electronically present. The public has the opportunity to access and participate in the electronic meeting through phone, computer, or tablet. Directions on how to connect are located on the Albemarle County website. The failure to state these items neither makes the electronic meeting illegal nor invalidates any action taken at the meeting. And I see that Mr. Mayo, Evan Mayo, is our other member who just joined, but he is recusing himself from this first hearing. We do have a quorum. Before we get started with the hearing, let's move on to approving the minutes of the June 23rd, 2022 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those minutes? Yes, nods. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
A second? Bob, all in favor? No. All right, perfect. Thank you. Now let's move on to our first hearing. This is application number 8. Applicants DJCM Investments. Property address is 1389 Richmond Road. Is the applicant on?
I'm promoting the applicant now.
Thank you.
Where is the video? There we go. There we go. Sorry. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So I'll start with my little spiel and then we'll get into the hearing. So good morning and welcome. We are the Board of Equalization. The board is comprised of 6 citizens of Albemarle County who are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We're an independent board that will be hearing the appeal today. I think we'll have 4 of our members. One is not attending today. One is recusing himself for his first hearing, and then we have 4 of us who will be actually listening to this case. Here's how the hearing will work. The applicant will have 20 minutes to present their case. The assessor will have 20 minutes to present theirs. and the applicant will have a 5-minute rebuttal period. I think, I'm imagine, Mr. Owen, that you are familiar with the rules, but just making the note, as I usually do, that per Virginia law, there is a presumption of correctness, so it is up to the applicant to meet the burden of proof. Before we begin, we're going to swear in the witnesses. So anyone that's intending to testify, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, both oral and documentary, which you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Owen, any questions before we begin?
No, sir.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, so as you said, the first case is 1389 Richmond Road. It is the car lots dealership. It is a leased car lot. It's a bit unusual. You know, most car dealerships own their space, and the purchase prices that they pay is usually based on the inventory that they can keep. Of course, that's changing in this kind of new situation we're finding where inventory is moving very quickly. A lot of orders are taken straight offline, and a lot of these newer used car dealerships have popped up. You know, convenience is a big thing, Carvana, car lots, etc. The subject property was built in 1964. It has 13,816 square feet of the actual dealership improvements. Land area is 162,479 square feet. The 2022 assessment value is $4,093,900. We valued the property based on an income approach using the actual lease. You know, there's not a lot of good data for lease sites such as this. So we thought that, you know, one of the most reliable ways is to value the property using the actual lease in place. And we also looked at it based on uniformity, and there's a little bit of uniformity difference between this site and the other car dealerships along Richmond Road. We reconciled the value to $3.5 million. Our indication from the income approach is 2.6. Our indication based on uniformity is 3.8. So it's not a lot of difference there, but it's, you know, just another way to look at this site. Primary issues of concern are kind of obvious. You know, actual rents indicate a value below the assessment. And then the land value for this site is above the average compared to the other car dealerships and parcels along Richmond Road. On page 3 of our packet, 3 of 28, is our pro forma income approach. The scheduled rents for this site are $240,000 per year. We use a very minimal vacancy allowance of 3%. We use operating expenses of 10%, which just represent the triple net lease there. Very low, you know, it's pretty much just a little bit of insurance and maybe a management fee. Net operating income of $209,520. We capitalized that at an 8% rate because of the age of the subject. You know, it's kind of a general second tier retail cap rate. You can go as low as 7 and still be right around that 3.5 value. Of course, cap rates for car dealerships are almost non-existent because of the way that they're purchased and the nature of the property. On page 4, I included our equalization grid. So we looked at CarMax, an independent car lot, the Kia, Flow, Toyota, and Ford, which all are up and down Richmond Road, in the 1300s and 1400 blocks. Lot sizes vary pretty largely. Improvements are pretty consistent. The largest one is for Flow, Toyota, and Ford. The rest are more similar to the subject. We looked at the value per square foot of just the land. The range is from a minimum of $13.41 up to $22.95. The subject's at 20.2. So we took the average of $18.63 between all those competitive sites, applied that to the land size here, comes up with a value of $3,026,742. We assume the assessor's own improvement value of $61 a square foot for an overall value there of $3,867,500. On page 5 is the actual lease. It was just signed, let's see, I think it was just 2 years ago. Oh no, last year. So May 1st, 2021. So it is a very, you know, current lease. It's with market. And the scheduled rents are found on page 6 of 28. First few years, $247,200. Years 11 through 15, $254,616. Moving on back, we included our cap rate study on page 23 of 28. First tier retail rates for neighborhood community centers and power centers is between 7.4 and 7.7. Second tier rates are 8.1 to 8.6. You know, they don't have a car dealership entry, but you know, somewhere in there is probably the right answer because this is a general retail rate or general retail property. This were to sell. The description of the tiers is found on page, sorry. The description of the tiers is found on page 28 of 28, and first tier properties are new or newer quality construction and prime to good locations. Tier 2 properties are aging, former first tier properties and good to average locations. I'd say this location is of course good. It's an older property, as I said, 1964, but of course it's been more recently updated. But that's what I have for you at this time. You know, our income comes in lower, our equalization comes in slightly lower. But of course, car dealerships are very difficult to value. You know, it really depends on, you know, what their inventory expectations are, their throughput, their sales, etc. So we thought that the best way to value it is based on, you know, the negotiated rents from last year and equalization.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping it pretty short. Any questions from the board for Mr. Owen at this time? Okay, let's move on to the assessor then.
So I definitely agree that as a car dealer, a cap rate is very difficult to establish and to support. One of the problems is not just the use of the property as a car dealer, and that it's very difficult to come up with certainly comparable cap rates off of car dealers, but also that the majority of this property is the land that the cars sit on. So you've got a very small improvement in a large property of 3 point some acres that basically are covered with cars, and you know, because that's what a car dealer is. So a cap rate, the cap rate, if you're just comparing it to a retail property, is difficult because the way cap rate works is it's basically rock and roy. It's return on capital and return on investment. So the portion that applies to a depreciating building is the return of capital. The rest is the return on investment. So if you have very little in one of those two pies, then the cap rate would be lower. So the cap rate on land is just straight land is much lower than the cap rate on an approved property. So we believe that, and that's why we did not develop this approach. We believe that the cap rate would probably be much lower than the one used by the tax rep, and it's just very hard to support it. If you used a lower cap rate, obviously you come up with a higher value based on the same rent. What we did do was, first of all, a cost approach. And in that cost approach, we obviously are taking into account that this is an old building, 1964, obviously with some upkeep done throughout those the last 60 years, but we are depreciating it at 57%. Is the majority of the value, as I said, is in the land on this property and not in the improvements. So with the improvement value, including all the asphalt those cars were sitting on, were around $930,000 out of the total of $4 million. So, like I said, the majority of the value is in that land value. Now there are a few sales of properties on Pantops, and just to point out, as everybody's on the panel is probably aware, Pantops is a very valuable artery, in a commercial artery in Albemarle County, second only to Route 29, especially the section of Route 29 closer to the city. And this is kind of the mecca of car dealerships. The majority, 9 of 14 car dealerships, I was surprised when I actually counted them up, are located right here by this subject property. And or of the 14 that are in Albemarle County. So this is the place to be if you want to be a car dealer and you want to have that synergy. This property fits well in there. It's a used car dealership where most of the other ones are new car dealers, and kind of complements that. So it's well placed. So there's no kind of surprise that it remains a car dealer. We also provide that there are that the comparison of the equalizations, the other assessments on the properties, show that the value is appropriate, and especially if you're comparing the some of those other properties, especially right along Pantops, that are newer buildings, they have more value in the buildings, but they're compared. Some of those are smaller, actually smaller land areas, so you can't fit as many cars on them. They end up actually covering other parcels, so they have multiple parcels that are included in their operation, so they can actually put more cars out. And as we should all know, the deal with a dealership is to have cars out there for people to look at. So that's where their inventory sits, is on the land. So the county, with the cost approach and the support of the comparable properties and the support of the land value, with the sale of properties, sale of land or improved properties that we can extract the land from that are on the Pantops artery. I think the land value as it's assessed is well supported, and that, you know, this assessment is appropriate the way it sits. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Any questions for the assessor? I have one question before we go to the rebuttal. There are three on the uniformity analysis from the applicant, page 4. There are 3 land values that seem to be outliers relative to, there's 3 that are around $20, which 4 including this one. There's one that's a little bit more, but there's CarMax, but especially Toyota and Ford are quite a bit less on a price per square footage basis. Is there some kind of adjustment there?
Now, which page are you referring to?
This is page 4 of 28 on the bottom. It says of the applicant's packet.
Okay, I got to get my magnifying glass for this.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at the car lots.
So there's the 2 CarMax is $17, Toyota is $15, Ford is only $13.41. So I was just looking at the areas. It looks like some of those are wooded, but I don't know if you're making an adjustment for that, or what's the.
I can pull them up. Typically, so these are all on Richmond Road. So they are all assessed with a base rate of $25 a square foot, but they are then adjusted for whatever might affect each one of them. So the larger ones would the biggest adjustment we would make to one of these commercial properties is a size adjustment. So as they rather large, they would have a larger size adjustment that would bring the per square foot rate down. I'm trying to match those up with what is on mine.
I think some of them include multiple parcels as part of it. It looks like.
Right. The Ford definitely has multiple parcels and it's very large.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's being renovated right now. and it's becoming the Audi dealer. The CarMax is 222,000 square feet. I don't have that under my sales, so I don't have the breakdown. But typically what the differences are, like I said, they're all assessed at $25 a square foot and then adjusted for their size. The topography issues, if they, if part of the lot is, maybe the back of some of these lots, I know the ones like the old Ford dealer, the back drops down and is not necessarily as usable as the front. So all of those issues affecting each specific lot will be adjusted for. And then the indicator adjusted rate will be different based on those adjustments.
Okay. Okay, I think that's sufficient for now. Anybody else have any questions before we go back to Mr. Owen for his rebuttal? David?
Quick question. Peter, what is the outbuilding portion of this? Does that represent the asphalt or?
Typically, yes, it's probably all asphalt. There
Okay.
could be a shed or something. I would have to look at the
It's a nice shed. I'm just looking on the map. I don't see anything except a lot of,
Yeah, it
lot
should
is
be.
almost all asphalt.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Owen, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay, I don't really have a lot to say. I'm well versed in car dealerships. I represent CarMax, Sheehy, Priority. So I know that there's, it's very difficult to value these every year. And, everybody uses the cost approach because that's the easiest way to think about it, especially because when these sell, there's so much, there's not a good separation between what they're paying for real estate wise and if they're buying a part of the business. That's why I thought that this was kind of straightforward sort of analysis to look at, because we do have that, recent lease. We know what, an investor would purchase this for with that lease in place, somewhere in that range. And then the difference between the lot sizes, it does have a lot to do with the scale, but there is an interesting difference between the lot we're looking at, which is 162,000 square feet at $20.02 a square foot. Whereas the difference between that and CarMax is about 60,000 square feet. They're down at $17 a square foot. And then if you look at the next most similar size, Kia is 109,000 square feet. That's at $20.96. So the difference between, 60,000 square feet is not exactly proportionate. But of course, you have to worry about whether the land is rolling. There's lots of survey issues. But, we thought that the best way to value this is a combined income / equalization approach. That's what I have for you this time.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any other questions for either of the parties? Okay, so well, thanks so much. Well, I think you're doing the presentation for this next applicant as well, correct? Okay, so I think it would make sense at this point. We'll go ahead and turn over to that one, and then we'll have our discussion afterwards in terms of both.
Okay.
So let's move on to application number 13. Applicant's Riverside MC owner, and the address is 2325 Seminole Lane. Are there any other witnesses that will testify other than anyone new for this one? Okay, so let's go ahead and same rules apply. So let's go ahead and get started. Mr. Owen?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Okay, so this one, everybody might say that this is really easy to look at. When the owner here purchased this deal, I was a bit speculative and not exactly very positive about this particular sort of project. But this is a medical office, and they're switching it over to be more of a life sciences property. It consists of multiple buildings, 4 different buildings. A total square footage of 111,475, different ages or different vintages, built in 1986 and 1990. The assessed value here increased a lot because of the sale last year. it went up to 421 or $219 a square foot. But a lot of the purchase price is part of their business plan. They are going through and letting the leases expire. They are trying to turn it over and repurpose this property. I represent a lot of properties up in Montgomery County, DNA Alley, these life sciences, and they're starting to expand more. This will be more of a unique property in the Charlottesville area. They're trying to bring this life sciences sort of properties down to Richmond as well. And the real value here is the build outs. These are clean spaces. They have, centrifuges and just very, very expensive build outs. And that's what they hope to accomplish here. The rents are going to be high at some point, but not quite yet. The subject itself is a Class B sort of property, just based on vintage and age. It will be, of course, vastly improved as time goes on. As of the value date of 1/1/2022, the property was only 67% occupied, and they hope to be letting go of the tenants which don't fit their business plan and getting in more life science tenants. We looked at the value based on the 2021 actual income, the 2022 budgeted income, pro forma with an above the line adjustment, which takes into account the leasing costs above the line, and then the more traditional approach where you take into account the leasing costs below the line. Because there is a significant amount of leasing that has to be done here, and the tenant improvements here will knock your socks off. It's going to be between $50 and $100 a square foot to get these spaces in line with what the market expects for this sort of industry. We place most reliance on our cost approach, or our pro forma income approaches to value. Both of those ended up at 16.8 and 16.9, so right in line with each other based on those adjustments. We thought 16,900,000 was the reconciled value for this. So it's probably best if we turn to page 3 of 23, and I'll walk you through our math here. The green box to the left is the budgeted income and expense for 2022. The 2021 income is annualized because they only owned it for 8 months of the year, or yeah, right about there, maybe 10. But of course, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. Those values indicated are right around 12.6 in both cases. So they're not expecting to really make this property worth the purchase price this year. Then in the blue box is the below the line adjustment, which is how an appraiser would look at this. They'd look at what are the expected rents. We use a ratio in line with the budget of reimbursements and other income. We used vacancy and collection allowance stabilized of 5%. We used an operating expense ratio in line with the budget of 24%. Of course, that expenses are going to increase significantly once they get more tenants in line. 20 cents per square foot reserve. We use the same cap rate as the assessor, 7.75 plus the tax rate. So our expense ratio does not reflect the real estate tax expense. We come up with a stabilized value of 19,108,858. Our discount for lease up below the line is 2,023,582, and I'll walk you through that math in a second. There is a significant CapEx project that has to be undertaken. It's $210,000 and it's for some roofs. Of course, the 1986 building is due. The 1990 building will be due very soon. So they, have to get this done to keep the income stream in line. But, a lot of the value here is speculative, and that's kind of what this comes down to. So the adjustments below the line bring our below the line adjusted income approach to 16,875,300. Above the line takes into account the lease up costs as a part of the rent. So this is what would actually be flowing to the owner once they pay out those costs. It's a little bit more of a fee simple adjustment. But of course, if somebody comes in and buys this, they're not going to be paying out. They're worried about those sort of lease up cost expenses. So I think the below the line adjustment is the better model. Moving on to page 4, this is a summary rent roll. I have the official rent roll later on, but as you can see, they do have some, medical office tenants. They also have in some of the larger spaces, which they're turning over and hopefully turning into more life science spaces. We have estimated rents from the owner for those spaces. They range between $10 a square foot for the 8,335 square foot space, which is the G4000 building is kind of their more flex building. And then the actual more medical office spaces are the 110, 200, 200, and 300 buildings. So pretty significant amount of vacancy space. On the bottom is my calculation of pro forma net effective rents. So this is the pro forma amount that goes into the green box. The total for our pro forma, the unadjusted pro forma is in the 1,608,380. So that's unadjusted. This is kind of, there's a big disparity between what's in place and what will be in place, but I wanted to take that on into consideration. One of the things that you may notice as an outlier is the Monticello Community Surgery Center, where they're paying in reimbursements of $15.01 a square foot. Those reimbursements are actually part of a tenant build out. So as I said, these build outs are very, very expensive, and a lot of the arrangements for these leases are essentially loans. So it's separate from the rents that are being collected, and it's they keep it separate for if this were to sell, the loan would stick with the current owner who's given out that loan. On page 5 is a calculation of net effective rents. So on the left-hand side is the average vacant space in buildings 1 through 3. These are going to be mixed gross leases. They're, as I said, expecting $20 a square foot in rents. They're expecting $50 a square foot in tenant improvements, 6% commissions. So it brings, a hypothetical 10-year lease where you're paying $20 or having 3% escalations per year down to only about $16.55 a square foot. Then on the right-hand side is that flex space I was telling you about. They're only asking $10 a square foot for. They're still expecting a $10 per square foot build out. 6% commissions brings the $10 a square foot down to about $8. On page 6 is leasing assumptions as provided by the owner. I have the email which supports this later on in the packet, but this is just easy summary, so it's easy to walk through. But they gave me probable rents between $20 and $25 a square foot for the medical office space, 10-year lease terms, $50 a square foot TIs, 6% commissions, 3% lease increases. Asking rents for that flex space, $12, probable rents, $10, 5 years, 3%, $10 a square foot. For that below the line adjusted, the calculation is found on page 7. So this is taking the annual market rent rate of $22 a square foot, which is kind of that mid range between the 20 and 25, $50 a square foot of tenant improvement allowance, lease terms, 10 years, 6% commissions, and then an annual discount rate of 7.55, which I took from PwC's fourth quarter 21 national average for suburban office, to bring down the beginning vacancy of about 25.4% down to 5%. So that indicates an overall present value of 1.8. And this, of course, is just for the medical office. The flex space lease up costs are found on page 8, $12 a square foot, $10 a square foot, tenant improvement allowance, 5-year lease, 6%, annual discount rate of 7.55 to bring the the flex space down to 0 vacancy. So that'd be about $203,000 of lease up costs. On page 9 is the official rent roll. So you can see, just where the vacant space is, it matches what I provided on the summary. But for readability purposes, I tried to make it a little bit better formatting. On page 10 and on back are the budget for 2022 and the income statement. Then I also include historical data from the appraisal on page 16, which includes that 2020 income and expense for the full year. And then on page 17 is email from the owner just discussing about leasing status, tenant improvement rents, capital expenditure budgets. So just to, I guess, expand on that, it said in 2022, we will be replacing a roof on one of the buildings, $210,000 in the budget, and installing a fire alarm panel. We're also redesigning our signage and landscaping, which is the site plan revision. So we may get it done this year, we slide into next year. But that's the big project for this year, is getting the roof on. And of course, the purchase price here is representative of a future value. It's a drawback of having to use a direct cap and not being able to use a DCF for these properties. It's easy to say, okay, they purchased it for, right around 25 million. It should, the value should be up there. But it's not to that point yet. And there's still a lot of risk involved with them restabilizing the property and getting it repurposed. So that's where the owner is coming from here. I also included in the package, starting on page 19, some of the previous correspondence between Mr. Lynch and Mr. Staples when he was there. And then with regards to that tenant improvement reimbursement, that $15.01 square foot for that kind of outlier reimbursement space. The backup for my lease up cost assumptions starts on page 20. That's an email from the owner. And then I also included the assessor worksheet. So yes, this property was purchased for, it was $24,750,000. And that was purchased last year, but it's a matter of them ramping up to that value. It's not quite to there at this point. This is a lot of speculation, a lot of risk involved, and that I hope that can be considered. That's what I have for you at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Owen at this time? David?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. I mean, I do live in the county and I'm a taxpayer. So just to understand your thought here, your client paid almost 25 million for this, values it at 16, says it's speculation, and basically wants county taxpayers to make up the difference because they're speculating. I mean, how do you reconcile that to a regular taxpayer? I mean, to me, it looks like an arm's length transaction and it's worth 25 million and that's what they paid.
Right. I think that, when they're looking into how it's going to ramp up, it will be worth that at some point. It's just not right now. As a taxpayer in a nearby county, I don't know the best way to reconcile that. But they looked at this there, if they had made some sort of allocation to some, speculative properties here, maybe that would have worked. But it is hard to argue when that purchase price is hanging out there. But there is a significant amount of vacancy to curate this spot, and that was part of the business plan. There is a lot of risk involved. I don't know, when they came to me with this kind of proposal before they purchased, I was like, I couldn't get to their value through my own, looking at what they're expecting, what's going to happen. So, I don't have a great answer for you.
Is it safe to assume that they did a deep dive on the property before they bought it and they probably already discounted all these repairs and upgrades and things that needed to be done? Or have they made all these evaluations after they paid 25 million?
I'm not sure about the roof. I think that was something they might have learned about afterwards, but that is kind of de minimis. I think that they were expecting, they're seeing these purchase prices up in, DNA Alley for $300 to $500 a square foot. And they had this, pie in the sky plan where they thought that, let's go to other, maybe less expensive areas to try to put in these life science sort of tenants. And, I don't know if it's going to work. I told them that. I was like, you have to attract, yeah, it's nice you have to have the UVA system there, but to get the sort of research dollars and the synergies that's necessary, I don't know if it's going to happen for them, but that's what it is.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, let's move on to the assessor.
Thank you. So this property, Mr. Owen did mention that it was changing from medical office to this research use, but actually it's converting still, or it's just converted from retail to medical office. So this property, the Ritz Raw Bar, I know was in this property before, and before it moved somewhere else, and they are definitely repositioning. So this property is changing, and if this was an established medical office
property over the last 10 years, we would be using their actual income and expenses from 2020 that were reported, and we would be establishing a value based on that, just like we do with all medical office properties that are established. And but with this property, with that change, we can't look backwards at what it was doing a couple of years ago. And it's hard to look at what it's doing right now, because there is that what the owner is looking to do with the property, the perspective. So we have done an income approach that includes that, potential for the property. It also includes all of the value. The tenant improvements are part of the real estate, even though they're not paid for by the owner of the property. So we can't exclude that out of the value. So whether, and I agree, we wouldn't necessarily, if there's a short-term loan that pays for that tenant improvement, we wouldn't necessarily use for that short term that added income, or that added income that was included. But we should include in either income that would be prorated over time that would be equivalent to it, or we should include the value of those tenant improvements as a lump sum added to the income amount, if you're only including the base rent. So either way, you have to include something for it in there in order to come up with the fee simple value for this property. Also, I understand that, this is possibly a speculative, how somebody can come in and say, well, I'm going to spend $24 or $25 million on a property because I think this is going to work. It's another thing altogether to convince a bank that that's what you're going to do, and that it's going to work. So apparently the owner has done that and gotten $18.5 million in financing through, I've lost the name of the bank on my write-up, but through a bank, and has created the deed of trust that is recorded. And that $18.5 million has to have been based on an appraisal that was done by a certified appraiser. And that appraiser has to have taken into account the potential for the property and an analysis of if it's reliable or not. So I believe there's a lot of support for the fact that this property actually is worth what the owner paid for it, and is worth it now. I've often heard that, I've paid this value, but it's not going to be worth that for 5 or 10 years from now. And I always have to reject that, because people spending $24 million on a property are a little more intelligent than that. They know the time value of money, and that $25 million today is worth more than $25 million 5 years from now. So on this property, what we have done is we've included a $28 rent, which covers the base rent, it covers the tenant improvement, and it covers the pass-throughs. But we also include about $1 million, or $15.18 per square foot for expenses, and this is quite a bit higher than the amount used by Mr. Owen. Now, Mr. Owen is building in the cap rate, so there's about $200,000 of real estate taxes that we are including in the expenses based on the current assessment that he is not. So that $200,000 would be expected to be different between the way we do our two approaches. But we're including another $300,000 above that, that kind of offsets some of that $28 per square foot rent. And that has to be taken into account. So, basically with this change in the property change in the use of the property that's been going on over the last probably 4 or 5 years. And obviously the sale price for this property and the potential of going forward. We believe that the current assessment of $24,421,000 is well supported. It's supported by the income approach. It's supported by the deed of trust that was just taken out in August of 21. And it's supported by the office medical offices in Albemarle County. So I believe that we are where we need to be with this property.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for the assessor? I had one question. It appeared that there was, I mean, I don't know if it was just the facade or what. There was substantial work done in the last few years in that shopping center or property. Do you have the permit information? I was just wondering if that was before or after the sale.
I do not have it. I did not put the permit information together now.
Okay.
I know that there's definitely a lot of work going on before, and there's continuing work going on after, but I don't have the amounts.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Mr. Owen, back to you for your rebuttal.
Okay. These are always the hardest ones for me. You know, the owner has an opinion of how to proceed, and you kind of appease them to a certain extent. It's like, okay. But, you know, I think looking at where they are now and where they can go, you know, there's going to be a few more years of kind of lower than expected rents. You know, right now they're getting $10 a square foot for, you know, about 6,500 square feet that lasts until 24. They're getting 16 or 18 or 11 square foot until, you know, in between 2024 and 2029. It just, some of these leases are going to be holdovers, and that's really what's kind of going to be the brakes on getting the income stream to where it supports that 24. You know, at some point in time it will. It's just not right now. That's what I have for you this time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, so Mr. Owen, we thank you for your time. We're going to confer and make a decision, and we should have something out to you within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you very much. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Michael.
Happy 4th. Take care.
Yep. All right, should we start with, which one do you all want to start with, the dealership or this one that is a little bit fresher? So, any preference?
Let's do the dealership just because it's in order.
Sure, that sounds good. Okay, so any comments, thoughts? Sorry, Evan, you can't say anything. I can start. I think it's pretty, I mean, yeah, it seems like that cap rate on that is too high, the 8% or whatever they're using for a deal. It's a lot. Pete, I didn't ask you this, but what, do you know offhand what the cap rate is for land?
I do not, but it would not be uncommon that it would be 5% or lower.
Okay. My only thing is the unit, my only question was kind of so I mean, you don't use cap, I mean, you don't use the income approach for any other dealerships. I don't think we should use it here. So if we use the cost approach, my only thing was that uniformity thing, but I think I answered, as I was looking at it, I think it's the topography that was the adjustment, because like Toyota, they're including all those back parcels, which are not paved, not really being used. And then Ford has a huge chunk of it, like you said, Pete, it must be going down, because if it hasn't been paved already, I have a feeling it's not.
I think it goes down. I think the topography drops behind that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's where your adjustments are, and that's why those are 15, but everything else seems to be consistent with $20 a square foot for the land. So anybody else? So my thought right now is I think it's justified, but anyone have any other comments?
I think it's justified. I mean, it's been a pretty consistent assessment over the years, and trying to remember, I don't think they brought this one up last year, did they?
No.
No.
Not this dealership. We've got the Flow folks we're bringing it up a few times, the other ones.
I mean, yes, it's an older building, but it's almost 14,000 square feet, and the entire lot is paved. I think asking for an improved value, he suggested 247,000. I think I mean, he's in agreement on the land. We're just 500,000 apart on the improvement. I think that improvement's worth more than $247,000. That's just how I feel.
And he said there were updates done to that. I think when they
Yeah.
converted to the dealership, they did update the building to make it, because before that, I don't know if they did auto sales. I know that in the back there was like a car detailing. They were doing car detailing in the back.
I mean, the two cases aren't related, but I mean, if we were to take his sort of speculation, someone's going to pay $4 million for this speculation. Someone's going to pay $5 million. So I mean,
And they did have it on the market in 2018 for $5 million.
2018, yeah. So that was 4 years ago. No takers, but I think it would sell for the assessed value, if not a little bit, if not more.
Walkie or Bob, any additional thoughts on this?
I agree with David.
Okay. So do we have a
Might
motion?
sell for more than 5, absolutely.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the assessor's value.
Second?
Second, third,
All in favor?
aye.
All right, perfect. So that is application number 8, and that has been affirmed. Okay, number 13, which is the shopping center. Anybody have any comments or thoughts on that one?
We can always count on David to ask that question.
I'm deeply insulted as a taxpayer. I mean, the idea that the taxpayer is supposed to make up an investor speculation is very funny to me.
Can we send a letter to the applicant saying, yeah, Albemarle County taxpayers do not subsidize speculators? Is that possible?
My only concern was like if we're using the cost of the income approach for everything else, but in this, it seems like there was quite a bit of improvements done since 2020, and they're changing the use of it. So I think that's justified to throw that out and not use the income approach here. So we have the sale, obviously. When was the sale? It was 21, right?
Yeah.
It was a 21 sale. I think they paid too much for it, but that's my personal opinion. But I don't know. Maybe it's mine is. I'm just throwing it out there. I think. Yes, Pete.
I would be arguing that we should not be looking at prospective rents and stuff like that, and we should be looking at 2020's income if it was the normal situation.
Right.
And also, I was finally catching up and being able to do my research Saturday on this, and I was very happy to find that deed of trust and that support. I thought, to me, that was the kind of the key to this. It was the support I was looking for. That shows that it's not just a speculative value. It's not just somebody, throwing some money out there.
There's probably an appraisal out there, right?
Absolutely.
And they didn't provide us with an appraisal. What was that, Bob? Same idea.
Why didn't they put the bank's appraisal in the
They
application?
forgot.
Oh, yeah.
That's so I mean, if we're throwing out the income approach, which I think we can here because of what the circumstances, I mean, then the sale is going to be our best evidence, and there's nothing really. He didn't put any other sales. It's really he was relying on income in his argument, and I don't think we can use that income. So, anybody else have any other thoughts on that? Otherwise.
I think I just agree with you. If they're repositioning the asset, that's an operations challenge and wouldn't necessarily affect the the value of the property. So I agree. I don't think that's reliable evidence for us.
And that also calls for all the vacancies and everything else. I know they're using the adjustments and things like that, but that's part of the reason why there's so many vacancies.
Right.
So the whole property is under construction too. So, okay. Any other comments? If not, let's do a motion. Seeing none, any motion?
Have a motion?
What's your motion, David?
I'll move again to accept the assessor's value of this property.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Who was that?
Lucky and both Lucky and Bob both did it. So, okay. So, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, I guess we'll adjourn till 11. I guess unofficially, we'll stay on. We'll keep it recording, and we'll just get off the video.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Yep. See
You
you.
all in favor?
Mr. Farrell, Katie McMichael has joined us.
Thank you.
The next applicant is here when you're ready for her.
I think we're ready. Good morning, Carol. I presume you're the next applicant. Your cameras both is off and you're on mute. You are still on mute.
Okay, how about now?
That's perfect.
All right, thank you. That's good.
Good morning. And
Good morning.
just so I have the pronunciation right for your last name, is it Flug?
Flug, yes.
Okay, perfect.
And my maiden name is Lynch.
All right. All right, Ms. Luke, we're going to go ahead and start with your application. It's application number 19. The property address is 500 Crestwood Drive, unit 2502. Just give you a welcome and a good morning. We are the Board of Equalization. The board consists of myself, Evan, Mr. Mayo, Mr. Beard, Mr. Nguyen, and Mr. Farrell. We do have a 6th member, but she is out today. We are, all 6 of us are citizens of Albemarle County who are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We're an independent board, and we will be making the decision today with respect to your assessment appeal. In terms of how the hearing will work, you'll have 20 minutes to present. The assessor will then have 20 minutes to present, and you will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. And then in between all that, we may ask questions during the course of the hearing.
All right.
One note I do want to just give, I usually give before these hearings, is just based on per Virginia law, there is a presumption of correctness. So what that means is the burden of proof is on you. So there's a presumption that the assessor's assessment's correct. You have the burden to show us otherwise. Do you have any questions before we begin?
No, I don't.
Okay, so let's go ahead and swear in the witnesses. So whoever's testifying at this hearing, please raise your right hand. And do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, both oral and documentary, which you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and proceed. Ms. Fluke, please proceed.
All right. I am Carol Fluke, and I'm coming to you to request that my real estate assessment be changed. Briefly, the situation is this. We have lived in rural Albemarle County for 45 years. The area has many positives, but as we age, the negatives of dangerous roads, poor phone and internet service, no cell service, and distance from fire and rescue services became more worrisome. My husband, John, passed away in 2020. I realized I needed to move to someplace with better infrastructure and closer to needed services. Living alone in a too large old house on a too large property was not ideal. That led me to University Village, a retirement community. However, in 2021, there were many more eager buyers than sellers, which led to several bidding wars. I was a party to 2 of these bidding wars. I lost the first one, but prevailed in the second one, purchasing Unit 2502 in December 2021. As you all well know, Albemarle County assesses properties at market value, which is defined as arm's length transaction between a willing seller and a willing buyer. In this case, the willing seller was asking for $450,000 for unit 2502. Because of the bidding war, I reluctantly paid $470,000. You can imagine my shock and surprise to receive an assessment of $529,600 based on its alleged market value only about 2 weeks after my purchase. This assessment is almost $80,000 above the willing seller's price and almost $60,000 above the bidding war results. Unit 2502 at the time of the sale in December 2021 was 28 years old and in original condition and had its original owner. It needed new flooring, paint, lighting, appliances, updating of kitchens and bathrooms, some electrical and plumbing work, and HVAC work. The runner-up bidder wrote this to the seller. We are making an offering price of $465,000, which is $15,000 above the price that the other University Village units have brought lately. We are also basing our offering price on the fact that the unit needs significant updating, paint, flooring, appliances, bathroom updates, etc. We realize that the tax assessments for all the units here at University Village have shot up lately. However, it is our understanding that the assessment assumes that the units are in updated condition. As soon as I received my 2022 assessment, I contacted the assessor's office. Lewis Herndon and Caitlin McMichael have been helpful in answering my questions. They gave me information about comparables, other recent sales in University Village, and told me the process for changing the assessment. When I filled out the Board of Equalization application for a formal hearing, I stated my opinion of the unit's value as of January 1st, 2022 was $460,000. To support this value, please look at the comparables on the spreadsheet I sent in labeled University Village 2021 Sales and Assessments, Exhibit 1. The units here are listed in order from smallest to largest in size, and it includes all the 2021 sales. If you look in the first column of the unit numbers, the first digit of the unit number indicates whether it's in phase 1 or phase 2. The second digit refers to the floor it is on. The penthouse, unit 1604, is at the bottom and it's separated because it is so radically different from the others. My unit, 2502, is the one with the box around it for easier identification. Unit 2402 was added because it sold only 2 weeks before 2021. It has exactly the same floor plan as my unit and is located immediately below it. For orientation in the building, see the photos in Exhibit 2 and 3. In reviewing the information in the spreadsheet or chart, please note these things. In the next to the last column, look at assessments per square foot. It makes sense that smaller units are worth more per square foot than larger units. All have the same kitchens and 2 bathrooms, the most expensive rooms of a home to build. Generally, the assessments are lower per square foot as the size increases. except for my unit 2502. In the last row near the bottom, the penthouse, unit 1604, and all of the 6th floor have higher ceilings than the rest of the units. The penthouse, which you can see part of in exhibit Exhibit 2, is in the center of the building, partly hidden by the flag. It has a huge Palladian window and a cathedral ceiling in its living room. It has 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3 sunrooms, and other amenities. The penthouse is remarkable. My unit is not. Yet my unit, 2502, has the highest assessment per square foot of all 2021 sales, including the penthouse. The last column is the assessment versus the sales price. My unit 2502 has the second highest increase of the assessment over the sales price, 12.7%, a mere 2 weeks after its sale by a willing seller to a willing buyer. Excuse me. In my conversations with Katie McMichael and Louis Herndon, they said one reason my unit was considered more valuable was because it was on a higher floor. Also, the view was a factor. I would like to add some information that mitigates those factors at University Village and for my unit. First, the higher floor. University Village is a retirement community. Demographics here show an average age of 84. Many residents need to use wheelchairs or walkers and have other health issues. Many have caregivers. There are elevators, but they are older and they do not work all the time. As you might imagine, some residents prefer a lower floor to make getting around easier. As an example, Exhibit 4 shows a solicitation from a realtor with a client specifically wanting a unit on the 1st or 2nd floor. In the case of this retirement community with these demographics, I do not think a higher floor warrants an escalation of the assessment. About the view, University Village sits on a hill. No views are bad, but the best views at University Village are looking to the east to UVA, Monticello, and the Southwest Mountains, or looking to the west at the Blue Ridge Mountains. I had hoped to be able to buy a unit facing west at the Blue Ridge Mountains, but none were available. If you look again at the photos in Exhibits 2 and 3, Phase 1 looks east or west, depending on which side of the center hall the unit is on. Phase 2, the north wing, looks either north or south. My unit looks to the north, and my view is primarily trees in the distance. Closer by, I see the service entrance with its parking, and I see and hear the large and loud cooling tower. My view and the sound of the cooling tower are far from the best. To the extent that the view contributed to my high assessment, a deduction is warranted. Again, back on the spreadsheet, Exhibit 1, look at the other 3 units the same size as mine. That's 1616 square feet. And they also have the same floor plan. Their average 2022 assessment is $448,333. yet mine is $529,600. I would definitely prefer to be assessed an equal amount for an equal unit. But if my assessment is adjusted to my suggested value on January 1st of $460,000, it would still be the highest assessment of all the like-size units sold in 2021. To summarize then, why should my assessment be adjusted significantly lowered? It should be lowered because of these 6 facts. Number 1, because only 2 weeks after its fair market sale by a willing seller to a willing buyer, my unit was assessed 12.7% higher. It was the second highest increase of assessment over sales price of all 2021 units. Number 2, because the assessments are generally lower per square foot as the size of the unit increases. That is, except for my unit 2502. It should be lower, number 3, because in this community with an average age of 84, being on a higher floor adds limited, if any, value. Yet I was charged a premium for being on the 5th floor. The 4th fact, because the view from 2502 does not warrant an increased assessment. Does not the view and the sounds of the cooling tower and service area deserve a deduction? Number 5, my assessment should be lowered because my assessment is unfathomably higher than all like-size units sold in 2021. If my assessment is adjusted to $460,000, it would still be the highest assessment of these like-size units. And lastly, number 6, my assessment should be lowered because my unit has the highest assessment per square foot of all 2021 sales, including the penthouse. The penthouse is remarkable. My unit is not. Please make my assessment more fair. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have a question for Ms. Flute?
I wanted to ask Ms. I'm sorry, the pronunciation has escaped me.
Luke.
Yes. Was there
Carol is fine.
Was there an appraisal done in connection with the sale in December of 2021?
No, there was not.
And it looked like it was a listed for sale by owner purchase. I wanted to know, were there any agents paid commissions in connection with the sale?
Yes.
Was that on one or both sides?
I know for sure on my side. I'm not sure about the other side.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Was the commission paid by the seller or by you?
I paid the commission to my buyer's agent.
Okay.
And it was outside of the sales price.
But based on the sales price?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the assessor now, and Ms. Lugo, you'll have an opportunity for rebuttal at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Arsali. So the University Village is a little bit more complex than we would think it would be. I agree with a lot of what Mrs. Flug said. I've appraised retirement properties a lot in the past, and the first floor is sought after. So typically
the first floor is got a premium. And then as you go up, there is a premium as you get to upper floors. So typically what you would see is that the first floor would have a positive adjustment. The second floor might be the base, and then you would go up from there. But you definitely have always had on a property like this, a positive influence for the upper floors for those views. I do want to, and Mrs. Flug, I'm sorry if we didn't communicate this to you, and it was a result of your initial review request that we did back in probably January, February. The comparable property that you list that on your sales, that is the unit, I believe next to you, we actually corrected the assessment on that property. And it is this, I have it right here. Let's find it. Unit. Oh, no, it's not in my write-up because it's a sale from 2020. That was on your list. It is a unit 2402. Let me make sure I have exactly the right number. Here we go. The assessment for 2022 was corrected to 510,500. And it is lower than the assessment on this subject unit because it is a floor lower. And when we look at the sales that, and we analyze the sales based on the ratio of the sale price to the assessment that we've established for this year. So that's our sales ratio study. So when we were looking at the 9 properties that sold in 2021 in this building, we analyzed the ratios that ranged from 89% at the bottom, which was the penthouse unit, up to 125% at the top. And what is unusual is that in a property like this, we would have that much variation. So the first thing we did was try to figure out, well, what is wrong with our model that would cause such a variation? The typical thing you do in an appraisal is you do match pairs. You look at 2 properties that are otherwise similar, but they have a difference in value or sale price based on something you can identify, one specific thing. So when we're looking at the 9 sales that took place in 2021, we look at are all the first floor units having low ratios, or are they all high ratios, or are all the phase 1 units, do all the phase 1 units fall in one extreme or the other? So we look at that. Among other characteristics, they're all built around the same time. The quality that we have is all the same. The condition we take into account in all of these sales we have are sales that need updating. They are dated in their finish, but none of them have been updated with new kitchens and baths and countertops according to the information that we have. So the last item is the size of the properties, and the size of the properties obviously can make a big difference. So are all of the small units on one end of the spectrum when it comes to ratios or the other? And none of those items were identifiable in this study as being an issue. You can single out specific properties and say that this looks to be over-assessed or under-assessed based on the difference in the assessed value and the sale price. However, as a whole, and we have to look at kind of a group of properties in order to come up with the market value and not one specific one. When you look at that group of data of the sales, it indicates that while there is a lot of variation to the ratios, you know, we are pretty much in the area that we need to be. We're at 100% overall as a median. And while our the variance is above what we would normally see for this type of property, it's not unreasonable. It's a, you know, for technical terms, the COD is our variance, and that's our measure as an assessment office of the variance. 7.65 is the number that is indicated from these sales. 5 to 10 is what our goal is as a mass appraisal entity. So all of the sales, while they don't look really pretty when you look at all of them, they definitely fall within the guidelines. And I think, you know, it takes into account that floor level difference, in which we do in this building, we actually have not found that the first floor is much higher and then it starts at the second floor, you know, base and goes up. We've found in the past, and it's still supported in the sales today, that the first floor is the base and it goes up from there. So so that's how we do adjust this this subject unit as being on the 5th floor, and that you know, it's basically a plus 40%. So we start at the first floor with 0 and we add 10% for each floor going up. It's very simplistic, but it also is borne out on the sales. We have not been able to find that the subject property was listed through MLS. We weren't able to find for a sale by owner listing or anything, because that might not, the record might not stay online. But we believe that the fact that it was sold, not sold through the normal means of advertising through MLS and marketing through MLS, that it sold for less than it would have. We also do, you know that there were a lot of bidding wars, and we've talked about this before, going on in 2021 and even back in 2020, and that the asking price is certainly not a measure of the market. It's really that whatever those final sale prices are, is what is used to determine the value. Whether, you know, there were multiple bidders, if there was one single property in out of a whole group of sales that was subject to a bidding war, that might be one thing. But when the entire market is basically operating like that, it's, you know, that is really the market. And that is my presentation for today.
Thank you. Any questions for the assessor?
I wonder if you could give me a summary or a clarification. You were talking about the variation model, and was it about assessment versus sales price? And did you say the average was a certain number, 7 or something?
So the median ratio was 100%, was right around 100%. And the COD, which is the variation, is 7.65. And that variation measure just shows that, you know, if we were coming up with ratios of 20% to 200%, that ratio would obviously be unacceptable. You know, our model is not creating values that mean anything. But the fact that we're coming up with ratios between 89 and 125%, while that 125% was is typically a pretty big outlier, the rest of the value, the rest of the ratios fall within a pretty relatively tight range.
And this is the ratio of sales to assessment?
Assessment to sales. So
Assessment to sales.
yes. So if the assessment is lower than the sale price, it would be below 100%.
Okay,
So as well as the board, does the board have any questions for the assessor? Yes,
Yeah.
Bob.
I'm wondering how are views from a place factored into the assessment at a place like University Village, if at all?
The view itself is just a component of the floor level. And we do not have, in our assessment model, we do not have a difference built in between phase one facing one direction and phase two facing another direction. But we also haven't found any data that supports a difference, like I was explaining, in those two phases.
So kind of following up on Bob's, that was going to be, I was going to have a similar question regarding the view, and then what Ms. Fluke said about the western views. So I'm looking at kind of the area. So I'm trying to now get, so phase two is the one that I guess is on the north side.
yes.
Phase
It's
one
the
is
North wing.
the north wing. Okay, and then phase one. So the phase, and then there's, I'm assuming there are two units on, there's one unit on each side of the building.
Yes,
Okay, so this is so has there been, yeah, the question is on the others, the western phase, is there any, have you seen any differences in price on the higher levels with respect to western or eastern facing views?
I haven't studied that.
I was actually directing the question to the assessor.
Oh,
No, we have not. And that's what I was explaining about, we would, if we had seen that, our ratios, all of the phase one properties would have been on one end of the assessment ratio study. They'd all be low or they all be high. And
I would think that it's not necessarily a phase one, phase two thing. It's a phase one or phase two facing northeast ones versus the southwest ones, right?
correct, that's true. And we don't have that much detail in our study. You mean if they're in phase two, but they're facing one way versus the other way?
Exactly.
I do not believe, Katie, do you know if we have that breakdown?
No, we do not.
We do not.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Luke, this is your time for rebuttal. If you have anything else you want to add.
I would just say to fit the definition of market value, what is better than the sales price? Especially when you have a number of like or nearly like units to compare with. I don't fully understand the algorithms and the model and the variations, but I do understand the market value, the fair market value. And I believe that all the things like the floor it's on, the view it has, the size, et cetera, all end up in the sales price. I think that's a summarized way of looking at the value. That's it.
Anybody else have any other questions? Ms. Fluke, just one comment and one question that I have. One is in terms of comment, in terms of I was just looking at it in terms of uniformity of assessments. I was going through it while we're doing this presentation, just so you're aware. It appears that the assessments are uniform in terms of level. So I know you're arguing that first floor units should not be valued less, but your unit it appears to be similarly assessed to all other fifth floor units. That's how the assessor is doing it, just for your point of reference. The second is in terms of your sale. Do you know if it was advertised, how it was advertised, or how you came about it? Because I think that would be helpful to know in terms of, because the assessor is saying it was a buy owner situation, it was not in the market, but obviously it appears that you had an agent. So do you know what the circumstances were there?
Yes, I can tell you something about that. There were more people looking for units there than units available. So I think this probably had been going on before, starting before 2021, because when I started to look for my next home, I chose, I had a buyer's agent, and she would look at everything all over the area. And after a time, I said, I really want to be in University Village. So there were rarely, maybe never, while we were looking, starting in the summer of 2021, anything on the market. But in July, there was one that said coming soon, and it was the penthouse. And for the penthouse and for one or two others that we looked at, they did have a realtor, but they did not put it on multiple listing, although they would let the word out that there would be, this unit was becoming available. And I think it was about trying to sell it before listing it. And also, so many people were looking for a unit that people like me, who had a friend already living there, would listen, ask them to keep their ears open if they heard of anything coming on the market. My realtor got upset at a couple other realtors because they were showing apartments and not putting it on multiple listing yet. They eventually did. In the case of my apartment, I heard by word of mouth that it was probably coming on the market. So I was not the only one, but several people contacted the seller's daughter. Actually, the owner was in assisted living and her daughter was handling it. So that's why quite a few units didn't, at least not at first, get on the listings.
Okay, that's helpful to know kind of how that came about. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it, unless anybody else has any other questions. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. What we will do now is confer and make a decision, and that decision will be mailed to you within the hopefully the next 2 weeks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you again. All right, any thoughts or comments?
I mean, my main thing that I was taking away from what she was saying there at the end, that
David?
Is this thoughts or comments for the board?
Yeah, for the board.
Yeah, sorry, Katie. That's for the board.
But I mean, I don't mind hearing but
well,
this is, I guess.
It should
be present during that part. Yeah, that's right. I mean, Pete sometimes jump.
It's correct, and that happens. I think we probably shouldn't allow that, but that's up to you.
No, that's fine. Let's go ahead and keep it within the board. Thank you, though.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the arm's length thing. I mean, it wasn't arm's length. I'm sorry, the seller put it at 450 because I think it could have sold for a lot more. I'll hang my hat on 2502 or 2504, which sold right next door to this one. That one was 1,346 square feet, so smaller. It was listed on the MLS for 450. Price escalated to almost 474. And that was the unit right next door to this one. So, I mean, if we take a square footage slightly, for a slightly lower price to offset that's a slightly larger unit, I think this would have sold for more than $500,000.
Do we know if that 2504 unit was which view it had? Is it like even and odd? Is it even on one side, odd on the other, or?
Is it right next door, Peter?
Yes, I believe they're right next door.
I think so too. I think the odds are on the other side.
If you know that, you can answer that. If you have that.
But she is right. This building is a problem in that there's a lot of word of mouth, and it's created problems within the MLS. Agents get a listing and they show it to their people. At least one of these has the same agent representing the buyer and the seller, which I don't always necessarily consider arm's length. I consider that agent putting themselves first and trying to get a deal done. So
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about the sale. I feel sorry for the seller. I think they could have sold it for more, but it's a trust, and they probably just wanted to sell it. I think they would have achieved a better result in the MLS.
So I think it's notable also that she paid her realtor, off the transaction price. That's $14,000 that would have been added there. Presumably another $14,000 if you'd use the standard 6% commissions on the MLS, plus whatever would have been added by a true arm's length transaction. To me, it would puts it, at least at 500 and probably in shooting range of the 530. I wouldn't be opposed to lowering this, 10 or 15,000, but I just don't see how you make the case that this is worth less than 500, given what we know about the market and the other units.
She's actually arguing for 460, so even less than she paid. Yeah.
Because of that's the bidding argument, the I bid, but that is the market.
Yeah.
So that would be like 484 with that. I mean, she paid 484 for it.
Correct.
I mean, you have to count what she paid. We're making an assumption she paid 3%, but that's most likely. I'm looking at the pictures, the views. I mean, obviously it's not part of the evidence, but it's part of our comp though, is a 2504. And if it looks like that is the east or northeast facing. So they do have the views of the Southwest Mountains. It's mostly trees. So it's not, I don't know if it's dramatically different on the east side as it is in the west side. In terms of views, but that would be the only factor I could see in terms of. One other thing was 2504. There are the comments in terms of that was repainted, new flooring and things like that. So there's a possibility we may want to deduct for that purpose but condos are difficult because everything should be kind of the same. It's the same market. It's not really that unique. The only thing I could see, the only factor I see is that the view factor. If everything on the fifth floor is valued the same, or there should be more value to the ones with the western view, the odd number ones.
But Mr. Lynch says that they haven't seen that in any of the data, so there's a view as you get higher, but not per side. I mean, I prefer the west view. The west view is very nice. It's hot in the winter, in the summer and the winter though, and I know there are people that prefer the eastern view. So. The west views are pretty nice as you get up higher.
Pete.
Just for full disclosure, I don't think we've taken into account whether they face west or east, north or south.
Okay. Those are just going to be my two things, just in the sense of, so in essence, she paid 484. We don't know. I mean, was that an arm's length transaction, or is that how transactions work there? And then and the other two things I would say is 2504 is that whatever improvements should we deduct, whatever the cost of new flooring and carpeting would be, and then the view, and should we reflect the view? So.
And also, it's a 9% increase over 2021, just in general. I mean, I think the average increase in Albemarle County, certainly in Western Albemarle County, is in excess of 8. So, I mean, it's also in line with average increases in the county. So, I don't know where we pick. I mean, we have to, if we're going to reduce this, we have to pick a justification. We can't just pick a number. We have to pin it on.
It's those two things, whether or not. Is it appropriate for everything to be considered average, even if it has new flooring and carpeting? Obviously, it's not the same as a new kitchen and bathroom. Is that appropriate? And then is the view thing appropriate? Should we make an adjustment for view, being west versus east? So I kind of go either way on this one. So I'm not. I could see her thing with the 484, but the thing is, it wasn't an MLS transaction. But then this other question is and then with 2504, did we look at, that was one, so it's sold for just, so at 473.8, it's sold for just less than assessment. About $5,000 less, 4,000 something and change under assessment. So even with those slight, again, I don't know if how much value do we put to flooring, carpet, new flooring and paint? Do we put any value into that or not? So.
They're not really upgrades, I mean, it's sort of maintenance in my
Yeah.
mind, but paint's maintenance, new flooring, after 28 years,
It's just limited, and we're also working with some limited information there. So it's, anybody else have any thoughts one way or another?
Hey,
David, I think you're in line. You're thinking it's so firm.
I don't really see anything, I mean, that she didn't bring anything to my attention that would make me think that this is out of line with the rest of the building or the rest of the county. Or I think she got a good deal and she should just be happy with it. I mean, sort of what I think.
Sure. Evan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do think she pointed out some ways in which the outcome of the process with respect to her unit does look a little different than some of the other units, but I don't know that I could, confidently say that she did enough to say it's worth 520 or 510. It's certainly not worth 460. So,
Okay, so you're on. So how about Bob? Because this one I think is just a little bit harder. So I'm just trying to go through everybody just to make sure we're kind of on the.
I'm just wondering whether you deduct for the lack of a view and how that would affect the assessments of all the other condos in University Village. I don't know.
And it's, and it's uniform. So
Yeah.
Yeah, this goes to Pete. In your office, you may want for next. Then I don't think you can do much with it this year because we don't have the evidence. And Milwaukee, I'll go back and get your thoughts too. But my only potential suggestion is take a look at that maybe for next year in terms of assessments and see if that'll have an impact. And Milwaukee, do you have any?
Yes, it's challenging because we want to be consistent. We can't on one case say, hey, you paid 25 million, so that's the number.
Mhm.
Then in this case say, you paid 460, but hey, you got a great deal, so this is the number. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we have to be mindful of how we approach it. Obviously, those commercial and residential is different, but we just want to be consistent in our approach, and not always have it, make sure it's not going both ways. So, I like what Evan said, but what David said, we got to justify any adjustment we make. So, I'm having a tough time justifying the adjustment. I like what Evan said, but I'm not sure. Can we justify any adjustment? But definitely not the 460. Definitely not that.
Right. Yeah, I think if we base it on what she provided us and the comps she provided us, and she didn't make the distinction between, and there doesn't seem to be a distinction, at least with the 2021 sales of the view thing. So, based on that, there's not really much. And then this was a buy owner sale versus the commercial listing. We're making the assumption, those are sophisticated parties. So it's a little bit different than a residential. And there's there's uniformity issues with condos because they're all kind of pretty much the same thing, except for slight variations. So
it seems to me the way they are selling these over there, just in terms of word of mouth, they're really probably suppressing the market big time. All of this word of mouth, my friend needs one, my friend's selling one, and that's how these, a good amount of these properties transactions are taking place. They're probably suppressing the market. And so when you look at it, like David said, I mean, she got a great deal, you know, I think, from a realtor's perspective.
Sure.
I thought, Waki, you bring up a good point. I had the same exact thought of hearing number 2 and hearing number 3, but you know, I thought about it a little bit differently. I mean, I think the buyers in hearing number 2 were fairly shrewd investors, and they you know, but I thought about that. It's a good point. I mean, you know, 470 is the sales price here. But
It was 484. I mean, with the
484,
we have to do.
Yeah, 484, but it's not an arm's length. And just to make sure everyone, I mean, she did not on her spreadsheet. I'm tilting my head because I couldn't turn it. 2402 is assessed, Peter. You say now at 510.
510, correct.
510, yeah. And did that happen as a result of this appeal?
As a result of her initial review in January or February.
You went back and looked at all of them, and
yes, and we found, and I include that in my write-up under that yes, we said, wait a minute, why is this one so low? And we found that it was put in fair condition incorrectly. So we
have you heard back from those people?
have not.
All right.
All right, so do we want anything else to discuss, or should we have a motion? Any motion?
Any motions? Does anyone feel that this can be changed? That there's something they can hang a change on? I don't.
I don't know at this time. I think if we have the information, the only thing I really see is if we're saying the painting stuff is not much, it's not going to be a factor. That's in the flooring. Then it's a question of just the view thing, and we don't have the information in front of us. So I think that's, again, my suggestion would be to the assessor's office just for next year to maybe do that review and just see if there is a distinction. Maybe that might be because you do have that variation there in your assessments. Maybe that's the reason why. But that's the only thing I would say. But I'm not as concerned about it after looking at the pictures for 2504, which is the one next door. It still has a pretty nice view. It's not.
Oh, the views are spectacular.
They're not. The eastern or northern facing view is not a bad view. It just might not be as good. So, seeing as that, I'm assuming we'll have a motion to affirm. So, anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to affirm so we can keep moving on here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Lucky.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So our next hearing is at 12. Is the applicant here yet?
Yes.
Do you all want to go ahead and go into that, or do you want to take a little break?
I'd keep going.
Everyone's good to go. Keep going. All right, let's do that.
I'm bringing in Dana Grimm right now.
Mr. Artali, we sent everyone a spreadsheet that the tenants had sent us. I sent that this morning. I just want to make sure everybody got that.
I received it. I think I'm getting nods.
I got it.
I am muted. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant. We're going to go ahead and get started with your hearing. That is application number 29. The property address is 2118 Aspen Drive. I want to start by welcoming you. We are the Board of Equalization. Our board consists of myself, Mr. Mayo, Mr. Beard, Mr. Nguyen, and Mr. Farrell. We have 6 members as well, but she is not available today. We are all citizens of Albemarle County. We're appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We're an independent board, and we will be listening to your tax assessment appeal today. Here's how the hearing will work. You will be provided with 20 minutes for your presentation. The assessor will be given 20 minutes for theirs, and then you'll have 5 minutes of time for rebuttal. In the middle of all that, we may have questions for you during your presentation, usually afterwards. One note I want to provide is just per Virginia law, there is a presumption of correctness, so the burden of proof is on you. So just that's what we're working with. We have to presume that the assessor's assessment's correct, and then you have the burden to show to prove otherwise. Before we begin, do you have any questions? You all are on mute, so but I see nodding. I just want to make sure.
No questions.
No questions. Okay. So whoever is testifying this hearing, please raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you solemnly swear? If you're going to raise your right hand if you're going to testify at the hearing. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, both oral and documentary, which you are about to give, will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank you.
Excuse me,
Dana,
one
are you
second.
testifying or no?
Take yourself off mute, Dana.
Just, I didn't see a hand or nod.
Thank you.
I think your hand was kind of low and she was muted.
I don't understand.
Should be.
This is we're asking from the assessor's office.
Sorry,
That's
y'all.
my question for
Yes,
them.
my hand was up. and I
Okay,
do
perfect.
swear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, back to the pennant. Go, please. Again, unless you have a question, please proceed.
Well, first I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us, and I assume you all have a copy of the spreadsheet. My name's Gary, it's my wife Susan, and I'll let Susan go ahead and talk to the spreadsheet.
Okay, well, before we start the spreadsheet, kind of go through quickly what we did. When we got our assessment in January, it had increased significantly. Dana, I believe, is the one I called and talked to. And the crux of our conversation was that because of Highland Park and the price of the houses selling in that neighborhood and the low number of resales in our neighborhood, that Highland Park was used as assessments, as a setting us the value of the property in our neighborhood as the comparables. So we'd written our first letter, and it had some objections that we thought had gone up a little bit too much. House price had gone up, and in total, it had a value of our house being assessed that we wouldn't pay for our house, and that other homes in the neighborhood hadn't sold for. So anyway, we received a response back, and some more work was done, some measurements were taken, we provided more information, and the assessment on the house went down much more in a reasonable amount. But the assessment of the land remained the same. The land had gone from 175,000 to 225,000. And we just didn't understand how the land value is going up so much. So I wrote another letter and appealed that the land value. The chart you have in front of you is just a comparison of values around us. We went up, what was it, 29% just for land. And there's a lot of confusion on our part as to why land would increase at all after a development is complete, and then why it would increase 30% in 1 year. The Highland Park, which was a comparative in terms of the house prices, also went up. So it wasn't that they were at 225 and they brought us up to 225. We were both at 175 and both went up 29%. So what we're appealing is that we feel that the value of the land is still, it's just way too high. It's 175. We haven't had anything done in the neighborhood. There's been no improvements on our land. Improvements all been in our property. Neighborhoods around us, Fontana, Cascadia, have not gone up as much. We reached out for a similar, not the same, but a similar development in Whittington, and they hadn't gone up. requesting that the land go back down to what it was before at 175, which is still more than it was when we bought it, but was, you know, it's neighborhood's like 6-7 years old now. There's nothing to improve. You have any questions on the comparison we provided?
I'll ask the board members if any of the other board members have any questions, but is there anything else you wanted to add at this time?
No, just kind of wrapping it up. Don't understand why land assessment would increase. Do understand property. That's not the issue at all, but land value. And then why it would increase so much in comparison to the properties around us. That's it.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board to the applicants at this time? I don't see any right now, so I'll turn it over to the assessor for their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rosali. So when we are assessing homes like this in Albemarle County, we are creating a model that incorporates both the land and the improvement value. And we create.
We're having a difficult time hearing the gentleman.
Is everyone having a hard time hearing me?
Yes.
It cuts in and out.
Oh, okay. Let's see if there's anything. How about now? Is it the same or
That's
better.
better.
better? Okay, so when we assess residential properties in the county within the neighborhoods, we actually even for rural areas, we are creating a model that values the improvements and the land as two components of the total value. So as we look at the sales studies, what we have done as these new homes were built in the Highland Park area is we've determined that those homes are highly comparable to the Highland Ridge properties. So we've combined them into one assessing district. There are differences between the lots in Highland Ridge and Highland Park. Highland Park ones are smaller, but they have amenities within neighborhood that are not in Highland Ridge. There's kind of a positive and a negative, but overall they're comparable in value between the two properties, and the houses themselves are comparable overall between the two properties. And when we're looking at the sale price or the analysis and the assessment of an improved property, our goal is to assess the overall property at 100% of market value based on sales of improved homes. If there are no sales of land directly related to a neighborhood, so the subsection of what we call the assessing district of Highland Ridge, which includes Highland Park in our analysis, there were no land sales within the old original Highland Ridge to base the land value off of. So we're using the composite of the sales that are taking place in Highland Park. Now, when we are determining, so when we're looking at the value of the properties in 2021, so what are we going to assess the properties at for 2022? We can either, and we're falling short on these sales studies. So our sales studies say that we are at 95% and we need to be at 100%. We can choose to either change the land value, change the improvement value through a multiplier, or do a combination of both. And when we were reassessing Highland Ridge, our decision fell with the support of these Highland Park land sales in adjusting the land value to get the sales that took place the sales ratios overall to come up to 100%. Now, out of the 19 properties that have sold, and that includes a lot of the new Highland Park homes and the lots that are in that Highland Park section, there were actually 3 that sold within the original Highland Ridge. And those properties, based on the change that we made in our model that increased the land and not the improvement multiplier, we are at 98.5% on 2128 Aspen Drive. We're at 99.98% on 2097 Aspen Drive, and we're at 100.0034% on 1826 Highland Creek Drive. These are 3 sales. They're all about a half an acre, just like the subject. The ratios are all almost exactly at 100%, and the median is right at 100% of those 3. And it's very strong support that our model is appropriate. And in response to why would the land change over time, land value definitely changes over time with the market, just because within a subdivision, there may not be any lots left, or even lots that are left are kind of the not the best lots. Though that doesn't mean that the land value doesn't actually go up. If the property was developed 5 years later, the lots are going to be worth more than they were 5 years before. So our assessment should reflect that change. And usually it requires us to extrapolate sales that are from outside of that neighborhood, but within comparable neighborhoods that will help us determine those land values. But when it comes down to kind of the final decision, why the land versus the improvement change is we make these changes kind of in batches. We change the improvement multiplier by groups of 5%. So while we might be at, I'll tell you exactly what we're at. We have a 105% multiplier that we're using currently in Highland Ridge on the improvements. So it takes whatever our model comes up with for Highland Ridge, that's based on all the sales in the county for the type of improvement this is, which is a 2-story home. And it adds 5% to that part of the value to create the improvement value. And then we set the rate for the home sites based on whatever information we've got. And in this case, instead of changing the 105% on the improvements to 110%, and then leaving the land the same, we made the decision that it made more sense in the balance of the ratio of land to total value and the progression of land value over time that we change the land value in this case. Next year, it might be that the land isn't really something we want to adjust again, but the improvements, if there's another increase in value that we need to match. So it's important to understand that the value has to go up for one or the other in order to reach that 100%. And we are required to assess at that 100% value. And I think there's a lot of support for the overall values where we are. You can certainly argue the points of whether it should be in the improvements for the land, but overall, if you were to lower the land on this assessment, you would have to increase the value of the home in order to get back to that 100% again. The reason why we don't we don't make minute adjustments to those adjustments. We go 105, 110, is because it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint those numbers to make 102% adjustment and then let's add $10,000 or $5,000 to the land. It's kind of a balancing act, but in the end, our requirement and what we want to do is to get to that 100%. adjustment. Having said that, Dana inspected the property. And Dana, if you would unmute yourself. So we did take a look at this during the initial review request we got on this property, which Ms. Pennant mentioned. And we found that there were some things that we needed to fix when it came especially to the description of the improvements. And Dana adjusted those to the correct, basically the correct description. And that caused the reduction in value. So once we did the review initially, we were very confident that we had gotten the property described correctly. And however, the land part of it as part of the model was appropriate the way it was set in the first place. Dave, do you have anything to add about the land in comparison to?
Well, I think that the Pennett's first, Mr. and Mrs. Pennett's first question regarding land value was why we had grouped Highland Park with Highland Ridge instead of with Fontana, because the Highland Park lots, there are a couple of little infill sections legally within Fontana and liable for Fontana Homeowners Association with Fontana Homeowner Association amenities attached. But instead of placing them with Fontana, we placed them over with Highland Ridge based on age of the homes being built, quality of the homes, lot characteristics, which turn out to be very similar to the lot characteristics in Highland Ridge rather than in Fontana. And there actually are a number of, I think, significant locational differences which argue for Highland Park, which is about 30, I think it's 39 lots, being placed within the Highland Ridge assessing district rather than in the Fontana assessing district. Some of the similarities with Highland Ridge would be sidewalks and curbside landscaping. It's very similar to Highland Ridge. Fontana has no such thing. Fontana has no curbs, no sidewalks. There's no street side landscaping. It's, the individual lots run right down to the road, and it's whatever that homeowner provides in the way of landscaping for, curb appeal or curb view. Fontana is a through neighborhood, which Highland is not. And those two streets in Highland Park are not through streets, which I think that is kind of significant to consider as well. In comparison in comparing the homeowners fees, let's see, we have Highland Ridge, the research that I just did on the MLS, the lots for the houses for sale are advertising $200 per quarter in homeowners association fees. And in Fontana, they're advertising $208 per quarter. Fontana does have the pool and tennis court, and they have a clubhouse. Both neighborhoods have walking trails. But we also found that, other pool and tennis clubs are available for membership at probably a doable fee if you wanted to join one around the county. So I just think that it's more reasonable to place Highland Park's lots with Highland Ridge on the basis of the site characteristics, the ratio of land value to total value, the price ranges of the two areas, and age of improvements. Fontana is really an aging neighborhood. Houses are up to 25 years old or more in Fontana. They're not really similar. They're not really similar.
And to add to that, we do absolutely admit that being associated with Montana and the amenities there is superior. However, these new lots are half the size of the ones that are in Highland Ridge. So we believe that those two are offsetting. So if you were to positively adjust the parcels for being in Fontana and using their amenities, you'd have to also negatively adjust them, and we believe equally, for the fact that they're half the size. And also, the assessment, the 225 is not arbitrary. 225 was the sale price on the lots that took place in Highland Park. So we've taken that value as support for the land in there.
Can I interrupt the question or ask a question?
Um,
I went through the.
in a moment, if you don't mind, I'm gonna see, I think the assessor, if the assessor's done, let me just make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just make sure the board doesn't have any questions for the assessor, and then I will turn it back to you. And as part of your rebuttal, you can ask any questions. The board, do you have any questions for the assessor? Okay, go ahead.
I went through the 2021 sales for Highland Park, and the land value and all the sales was 175. The data online is wrong? I mean, I just used the online assessments. Because both Highland Park and Highland Ridge were raised from 175 to 225 for 2022. So I'm understanding what you said about, we didn't know about this district. From what you said, it makes sense. And I understand about Fontana, but that's just addressing the value itself. There's also was the question of the value for 175 to 225, but 29% increase versus 6-7% the other properties around us are incurring as an increase.
But I'm trying to understand the question. So you're asking, you saw that the assessment was 175 on the lots in Highland Park? Or
Yes, for the sales in 2021 that I checked. And in 2020.
I think that's what the assessors, they're not saying anything differently. I think the assessor's saying the 2022 assessments are all 225 as they are yours. And there were sales in 21, and this is what I understand. There were sales in 21 which were for $225,000. Not that the assessments for
I couldn't find those. Everything I found in 2021 showed the sale value with the property at 175. I can go back and look. I thought I looked pretty thoroughly.
I think you're referring to the 2021 assessments, and that is true. They were at 175, and that was what the builder was paying for the lot, for the lots when he was taking them down for new construction. But his price went up to 225. So we're dealing with the 2022 assessment, and they are all at 225 now.
Phase 2.
Is that for phase 2, his new lots? Not the ones he already sold?
It's for Glenlee and Balluna Lane. So it's for both of those little sections.
So he raised he doesn't have any sales left in Highland Park 1. So he had more infrastructure cost, way more infrastructure cost in Highland Park 2. So he valued those lots at 225.
So those lots are at 225.
But that didn't occur until 2022.
Well, that's the assessment year that we're dealing with.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right, but I'm getting a little confused because I understand the districting. But you were speaking, the gentleman was speaking as if 2021 in Highland Park was also 225, and you brought Highland Ridge up to 225.
That's what they have. We have a list here of sales, and they can put it. I'm just letting you know what we have. It's showing about 6 or 7 sales on Bluno Court from May 21 through December 21. Let me see how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sales. And they were at 225.
Yeah, that's Balluna. That's phase 2.
That's phase
That's
2.
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what it's the phase 2 then. That's the
2021.
They're all 2021 sales. Yeah, there's one, like I said, there's
But
7
that's
of them.
Balluna. That's still phase 2.
No, but where were the sales in Bovino phase in last year?
Yeah, that's the houses sold last year. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't find them on.
But these are, I guess, these are the
Okay,
land
I'm
sales.
sorry, we're having private
Yeah.
conversation.
You're
Yes.
fine. It's between the developer and the builder. But let's go ahead and give you an opportunity to have your 5 minutes for your rebuttal. I think we as a board understand, unless anyone's we'll ask questions and try to figure out what the answers are. But if you have a rebuttal or anything else you want to add, please feel free.
No, I heard the explanation, understand the districting. I gotta say, the math part sounds like more that we're just trying to meet a goal and the land was convenient to go up. Because the concern is land, I gotta say, I can't quite agree with you as an individual on why land value goes up after a development's complete, but that's just me. But the fear is, a house will go up and down. We're gonna have a whole lot in both neighborhoods. We're gonna have a whole lot of sales for 2022 to be reflected in 2023. But I don't understand why land value would ever go down. So we're stuck at this 225. It can only go up. And I just don't understand really how 225 is an equitable figure for land that's done. The property can increase, but it'd be like, as an example, I could see the land in Fontana going up if the county came in and put in sidewalks and drains. Then that makes sense. Land would go up because you have improved the land itself. But in a property that's done, the sales are all done. The buildings have been put on or will be put on. I'm just not quite understanding that. That's just a confusion.
And if I could just add though, just specifically for phase 2 of Highland Park, which is Belluno Place and Court or whatever, that's phase 2. I can understand why those lots would be more expensive, 225 versus 175 for those lots on Glenway. Because if you've seen those lots in phase 2 on Belluno, they basically moved an entire mountain and put it back again. They put up huge walls. I mean, just the infrastructure to build out those few lots. And I think there's only 15 houses. So you have 15 houses to amortize across that what had to be extraordinary cost for land development. And I'm pretty sure that the builder, when they were doing phase 1, actually, I have heard that their cost for developing that was way more than they planned. So I think they were just trying to recover their costs in phase 2 across a smaller. So I don't think 225 is representative of the amount of land development cost between phase 1 and 2 and between Highland Ridge. Because Highland Ridge, yes, there was development land development costs, but that's spread out over 100 homes versus 15 homes. So I think the 225 is just not. I understand there's an option if you can put the cost in the house or the land, and they all got to add up to 100%. But I just think it's a bad precedence to all of a sudden peg 150 homes or 140 whatever homes at the 225 level. I think it's going to upset the model, even though it's sort of like a second order thing. So I don't think the 225 is a good number, and I don't think, and that's what my wife's saying as well, is we can't. That's not a sustainable, justifiable number because it requires a 29% increase, which is just not.
It's not reasonable.
It's not. It's just. It's not comparable at all. The land development costs and everything aside, it's just not. It's not a comparable number at all.
I think. Let me try to assist in translating. This is still in our role, but I don't know. It might be helpful. From the assessor side. I've been on the board for a few years now. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm just want to be helpful in this. Your land value can go up and it can go down. It's not going to be set at a number, and it goes up, it goes down. That's land everywhere. I mean, if I have a piece of land, it could be in an established neighborhood, or it could be unique or whatever else. It'll go up, it'll go down, just like any other real estate. The other thing is we're actually looking at the big picture. So for our purposes, we've got to look at the full price, not just what the assessor looks at as land value and improvement. We have to look at the total number and see, is the total number appropriate? Is that appropriate for the value? And so whether or not it's 225 for land, is that correct or not? At the end of the day, we have to look at the total number.
Right.
So we can't really just, and then the costs for the builder, for the other lots, again, not really relevant. It's the sales of those lots that are relevant for our purposes. We don't care how much they cost. It could cost them $500,000 a lot. It's what they sell it for. So those are a couple of things just as you're saying it. And I'm hopeful this may be a little bit of a translation from the assessor's side to kind of a homeowner side. Hopefully that's helpful, but and it doesn't mean we made a decision either way. I'm just trying to kind of translate. So hopefully you understand the fact that your land value is at 225 doesn't mean it's locked in at 225 by any means. And what the assessor is trying to do generally is they have to get the market value right on all these properties. So they've added to the land, they've added to the improvement, but the number we care about is that total number more than we do the breakdown. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments from the board. Do you all have any other questions or comments or anything else you want to add at this time?
No, I think it's just the spreadsheet. Oh, I'm sorry. Who are you asking?
Yeah, I was asking you all.
Oh,
Yes.
No, I think the spreadsheet was just what we were trying to show that. We do understand where you're coming from Highland Park too, but yeah, as you said, the developer set that price, and the developer of Craig, Ryan, Southern, and Evergreen, when I asked them how they set their lot price, it is based on the cost of the land and at bulk and then the improvements. And when they have to, as Gary said, when they have to cut down a mountain and then put it back up again, and I don't know if you've been up there and seen their retaining wall, but it is something to see. So they had a lot of issues with infrastructure that drove up their costs, land costs.
Yeah, and we understand the total cost perspective, and I appreciate that. So I think we have a better understanding of that. I just think it's a bad precedence because if you look at the ratio of the cost of the house to the land, that has changed as well, making the land more significant part of the cost. So I don't know. I guess we're looking for more consistency as homeowners. We don't expect things to change, and they're obviously going to change based on house values, but proportionality is now tilted towards the land. So, anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Understood. Well, anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, we thank you so much for presenting this. We will deliberate and send you a decision hopefully within the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
We really appreciate your time, and we appreciate what you all do as a board and as members of all members of Albemarle County. It is a difficult situation, especially the way the county is growing. So I know it's not an easy job, and appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion?
Well, I don't mind pointing out the 3 sales that the assessor brought up were all MLS sales. Average day on market 3. I believe 2 of them sold for more than the asking price. Average price per square foot was $231, but the average size of these were a little under 3,500 square feet. 2 of them were on a slab. Applicant's house has fairly significant finished space in the basement, but it's a 4,960 finished square foot house. The idea that it's worth $805,000 is fairly ludicrous. They wouldn't sell it there. They'd list it well in excess of $900,000 pretty easily. So that's sort of what I got out of the MLS.
Yeah, I think they had a hang up, it seems, on that. They have a hang up on that land value and the concern that they're stuck with that, and this idea that land value can't go down, which obviously it can. But and that in established neighborhoods, you set a land value and it's done. But I think they were happy. It seemed like they were very happy with the improvements
Going down.
as much. I think it went down more than they were expecting. It's just that it's the land value that's. I think if the land value was reduced some and the improvement value was higher, they probably would have not appealed this. But they were really stuck on that idea of the land value. But
Changing from 11:59 on December 31st to 12:01 on the 1st of January. I think they noted. They didn't.
Anybody else have any points of discussion? I'm feeling we're going to affirm this. Let's have a motion then.
I'd move to affirm the assessor's finding.
Do we have a second?
Second.
You guys.
Always the same time.
I saw Joaquin first.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
I was waiting for Bob.
I know, right? You guys both wait for David, I think you got to reflect that. I think every one of these has to be both of them seconding at the exact same moment. Okay, so I don't think we have any issues with availability on Thursday. Yes, Pete.
I am still working on the analysis for the mall for Thursday. I have not seen any transfer of the property, which the tax rep or agent or whoever he was that I spoke to had indicated. So that as far as I know right now, the property has not transferred to another owner. And he also indicated that he probably wasn't going to be at the hearing, that he hoped that you would just do the hearing in his absence.
That's great. So hopefully we'll have a 30-minute hearing for all four.
So I don't know that for sure, and I haven't heard from him in the last couple of weeks.
All right. Do we have anybody else?
A quick question, just Pete, I know we've had one change, so I know Anthony and I will have to sign that change. Do you plan on just waiting till after Thursday, or are you going to wait till after the July hearing too?
No, we can just do it after Thursday and get the ones that we've done so far out.
Perfect.
And group those together.
Okay. The next one's going to be mid-July, right? Late after that is
19th.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second. Bob. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll see you all on Thursday.
All right. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.